Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to give everyone else a minute or two to join. So if you need to go ahead and grab some water, grab a snack, go ahead and do that. And we will get started in another minute or two. All right. Well, it looks like we have a pretty good group here. So I think we can go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining. We're really excited for today's webinar. So we'll go ahead and start off by doing some introductions. So, hi, everyone. My name is Bridget Moran. I'm our content manager here at CourseDog. So, really focused on all things content and research related. Super excited to be speaking to you all today. And I'll go ahead and pass it over to Lucy now.
Thanks, Bridget. Hi, everyone. My name is Lucy. I am a product manager here at CourseDog, and I focus partially on our catalog solution. So excited to get to talk to some folks today. Awesome. So before we dive into some things, I wanted to just quickly provide an overview of what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to begin by talking about some of the challenges we've seen and how catalogs today are typically structured. And then we're also going to spend some time talking about some practices that we've seen to make sure that the catalog is accessible to all students. And finally, we'll be talking about a little bit about how the catalog is connected to any compliance regulations and funding initiatives. So this will include touching on Title 4, 3, and 5 compliance, and understanding connections to VA benefits and grants. Of course, we will be leaving some time at the end for questions, but feel free to submit them as well in either the chat feature, or you should have a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll do our best to monitor those throughout the presentation. Finally, we're going to be conducting a few polls throughout the session, and we're looking forward really to getting your perspectives on the topics surrounding catalog and also learning more about how your institutions are each approaching the catalog. So with that said, let's dive in. Thank you. So we'll spend some time, as I said, looking at how the catalog is structured, including how it maybe has or hasn't evolved over time. And we'll also be looking at what is historically defined college and university catalogs. Finally, we'll also be quickly walking through the types of material that we typically see living in a catalog today. And on this slide, you can see a quote, and I think this quote really sets the stage quite well for what we'll be talking about in this first section. This is from a university business article about a university or college catalog, and it notes that while we live in a very digital age, a lot of our processes across higher ed have evolved and been digitized. The catalog is an exception when we think about how little the catalog has transformed over the years. And really to show that, we've included here 2 screenshots of catalogs, which are over 100 years apart. So on the left, you'll see a program plan from what was called the Los Angeles Normal School, an institution which eventually evolved into present day UCLA. And this is a screenshot from UCLA's digital archives, and it really lays out the courses students are expected to take each year in certain requirement areas. And on the right, you will see a program plan from an institution in the US in 2023. So I don't want to name any names because practically this could be from any school, but you'll notice there's really little difference between the catalog on the left and on the right. Yes, the catalog in 1900 certainly was printed, and the one in 2023 lives online. But beyond that, the only really meaningful difference is the typography. And to me, that's pretty stunning when you think about all the ways higher ed has actually evolved over the past 123 years. So Some things that we know is that given how little the catalog has evolved, it's really bound to cause a couple of problems. So first, even with all the technologies available to us today, many catalogs are really still simply an online version of a PDF. One study of community college catalogs by doctors Terry O'Banion and Cindy Miles found that half of the catalogs they examined were actually just verbatim digital reproductions of the print catalog. And we'll talk about this study a little bit more on the next slide, but this digital replica of the PDF is problematic for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, online PDFs are extremely difficult to navigate and search. Students have to scroll through oftentimes hundreds of pages and rely on tricks like Command F to help sift through an overwhelming amount of information. This means that students might miss information they're looking for or become overwhelmed and stop looking altogether. I'm sure we've all had that experience with an online PDF. And I know that some institutions really are a step above an online PDF and may even have some areas sectioned out, but without a search function and consistent navigation to guide students and other online visitors, this can still be really overwhelming. Additionally, within all of this information, students oftentimes have to navigate their way through institutional jargon and really try to make sense of what they're reading. That same study by Doctors O'Banion and Miles found that catalogs frequently use terms such as accreditation, academic load, articulation, lower division, and more that really may be natural to us who are breathing higher ed every day, but are oftentimes foreign to students who may just be matriculating. While some schools did provide a glossary, I think we really have to ask how realistic is it to expect students to reference and learn those glossaries. One catalog studied actually had a dictionary of 372 acronyms, which is definitely overwhelming to just think about. So on the right, we can also see that we know students today spend much more time on mobile devices than students in the past. And actually, in a former life of mine, I used to conduct web audits for colleges and universities where I examined program pages. And mobile responsiveness was definitely a category that we looked at a lot, but many schools didn't fully offer. Additionally, the catalog doesn't live in a silo. It's intrinsically connected to the curriculum, to course scheduling, and more. And yet it's often managed and updated separately from these other academic processes. Finally, the catalog has frankly become an overwhelming repository of information as institutions have grown, added new programs, included new policies, and been subject to new regulations. And so we want to dive into this point actually a little bit more.
Thanks, Lucy. Yeah, definitely a lot to think about there. And that study that you mentioned on the previous slide by Drs. O'Banion and Dr. Miles. So you'll see some more of that data presented here on the slide, where they looked at about 30 community colleges and came up with some pretty interesting findings, which you'll see here on the slide. So overall, they found that on average, the catalogs they looked at ran about 319 pages long. And of course, there were some differences across institutional segments. The catalogs they looked at might have, been 200 pages, while some were upwards of 400 pages. And I think it's important to note that this study was just looking at community colleges. So, can you imagine how long a catalog at, a 4-year comprehensive research university might run? Pretty overwhelming, I think, to think about. And aside from the sheer length of the catalog, students were also presented with a dizzying array of options. To meet, 10 to 11 requirements, students at the institutions they examined had to choose from between 95 to 215 courses. And this is a lot to navigate, even for, the most well-resourced and well-informed student. So given all of this and what Lucy was talking about on the previous slide, I think Drs. O'Banion and Dr. Miles summed it up pretty well when they said that, catalogs are crammed with a lot of information really to make sure that nothing is left out. However, this makes it really difficult when you're looking for something and certainly doesn't really put, the student needs first when thinking about their experience navigating through a catalog. We know that this is true from other studies as well. ACRO actually recently published a survey on the state of academic operations in higher ed, and the catalog was one of the areas that they examined. In a survey of over 220 institutions, they asked what was included in the college or university catalog. And of course, you'll see many of the items that you'd expect, such as course descriptions and degree offerings, at the top of the list here. But there are also a bunch of other types of information included as well. Institutions include information such as learning outcomes, program pathways, and other various policies. And we actually couldn't fit all of the information on one slide. So you'll see between the previous slide and this one, there are around 15 different types of information included in a college or university catalog. And I'm sure this probably doesn't include everything. I'm sure all of you on the line could probably add to this list when thinking about what's included in your catalog. So here you'll see some of the other types of information often included, such as the academic calendar, accreditation information, names of faculty members, and admissions criteria. So, when I'm looking at this data, what I'm really wondering is, who has actually read an entire catalog? I think many of us on the line that work in the registrar's office or other related units, you all probably spent lots of time with the catalog, but probably not many others on your campus. And I'd be curious how long it actually took for the authors to review 30 catalogs. I imagine that was probably quite the endeavor. So, with all of that being said, in an ideal world, the catalog I think would be pared down. But since this might not be an immediately attainable goal, we're going to go ahead and talk through how we can at least make them functional for students today. We'll begin this section by looking at features your catalog should have to serve all students. Then we'll see how this plays out in terms of serving both prospective students and current students on your campus. And then we'll finish up this section by discussing how the catalog and curriculum lifestyle match up, or perhaps don't match up, and what impact that can have on students. So we just spent some time talking about the ways in which the catalog is often flawed. And, while I think the concept of outdated and confusing catalogs might feel distant, we actually have some data here that shows the real impact on students. Earlier this year, we conducted a study with College Pulse, and it found that 1 in 4 students reported that they had difficulty navigating their institution's catalogs. And similarly, 1 in 4 students also said that it was difficult for them to navigate their degree requirements and understand which courses they need to register for. And it was actually pretty interesting. We kind of did some cross section of the data from the survey. And we found that students who reported that it's difficult for them to navigate their institution's catalogs, these students were 4 times more likely to report that they experienced difficulty enrolling in the classes they need. So definitely a real impact that students are feeling out there. So we're going to go ahead next and talk about, how we can perhaps go ahead and, begin to address this. But I would first love to launch our first poll here and learn more about, where you think you have the biggest opportunity to improve the catalog. So we can go ahead and launch the poll now. Great. And we'll leave it open for about 60 seconds or so. Right, and I see the responses are rolling in here. So if you haven't had a chance, go ahead and select your option here. I know we could probably go ahead and select this whole list, but just thinking about kind of where you would prioritize the first thing that you would like to do with your catalog. All right, we can probably go ahead and close the poll now. And okay, great. So it looks like we have a pretty interesting mix here. The first one, making sure your catalog is up to date. Yep, that's huge. If students, are getting information that's incorrect, that can definitely have a real impact on, what policies they're following, what courses they're registering for. So, yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And the next one is mobile friendly. Yep, as Lucy was saying, a lot of students using mobile devices, tablets to access this information. But Lucy, I know you spend a lot of time talking with our partners about this, so would love to get your thoughts here as well.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I think a concern around having a catalog that accurately reflects whatever the given academic period is definitely a top concern that I think we end up speaking with institutions about. I'm also really curious in the the kind of I'll call it potential overlap between some of these concerns. So, if something's mobile friendly, can we inherently say that that needs searchability, or how do those feel, separate versus kind of continuous? And so, yeah, interesting insights, excited to see that info.
Definitely, and I see we just received a comment from one of our attendees here in the Q&A, and Dina said that she selected up to date, but really thinking about what's actually required to be in the catalog versus what is fluff. And I think that's such a good point. As we discussed on some of the previous slides, these catalogs are running hundreds of pages long, and no doubt when a student goes there, their eyes kind of glaze over and might not make it through to the actual information that they need to find.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, wonderful. Well, as promised, we'd love to talk about some of the features to really enhance catalogs. And when I was creating this slide before the presentation, I was originally going to title it "Key Features to Stand Out." But as I thought about it more, I was like, are these really features to stand out, or are they just features to really keep up with student expectations? They're interacting with basically everything else in their lives online, and they're kind of expecting to have these features whenever they're navigating with information and content online. So I'm sure, as most of you would expect, students are typically turning to Google or perhaps another search engine first. And so making sure that your catalog and associated pages are search engine optimized or SEO optimized is really important to make sure that when students are typing in University of X catalog, it's really coming to the top of the search result and making sure that they can find it easily. Of course, your catalog should also be loading quickly. I don't know about all of you, but personally, if I go on a web page and it doesn't load, even after maybe 2 seconds, I might X out of the page because I'm like, this isn't working. Let's find another way to find this information. And as we've already talked about, it should of course be easily searchable and be mobile friendly as well, as many of you pointed out in the poll in the previous slide. Accessibility is also another key feature that I think is sometimes overlooked, especially when a record number of students are coming to college with a disability. We need to make sure that they're able to easily access the information they need. And especially when you think about it, your website, your catalog might be one of the first places that they're actually really interacting with your institution. So I think it's important that, we all ask, what will, a student's perception of your institution and inclusion be if they aren't able to, navigate your catalog? And logical and consistent navigation is another area that I think really, might seem simple, but surprisingly isn't always done in practice. So I think there are a couple of questions you can ask, such as, does the navigation bar at the top or on the side always remain the same, no matter what page a student clicks on? Are they 3 clicks deep into the catalog and, is it looking the same, or is all of a sudden, are things changing? And are students able to, easily return to the homepage with one click of a button? And finally, I just want to point out here is mixed mediums. I think it's pretty safe to say that a lot of our attention spans have gotten shorter, and, no one really wants to read huge blocks of text. So does your catalog, use visually appealing colors? Are there graphics? Are there maybe some pictures included to break up the text? And, when thinking about prospective students, are there, calls to action that encourage them to request more information? So I think, including many of these features can really help draw students in and encourage them to engage with your institution. So all the features we just talked about, I think can really help folks, more effectively access your catalog and then after that, be able to actually explore that information. So what do students actually care about when it comes to your catalog? We're going to go ahead and take a look at prospective students here first. So, far and away, accessing information about degrees and programs is the most important thing that prospective students care about. In a survey conducted by College Pulse, they asked 2,000 current students across over 100 institutions about what factors influence them to attend their current institution. 65% of these surveyed students reported that offering my major or program of interest factored into their decision to attend their current institution. And offering their program or major of interest was also one of the top two reasons students chose their institution. I think unsurprisingly, career prospects was another major contributor when it came to students' decisions. Career prospects was the third most important factor in this same survey they found. However, a different study that we also have referenced on this slide found that a third of students are actually unsure about which program aligns with their career path. And I really think this points an opportunity for institutions to, really try to do a better job about tying academic programs to that career information in the catalog. And finally, I want to quickly touch on what this could mean for prospective students who are thinking about transferring to your institution. The same survey I just referenced found that two-thirds of transfer students at four-year institutions said that they could have used more advice on which courses are eligible for transfer credit. So making sure that this information is, really clearly spelled out in the catalog, I think it's pretty critical so that, we're making it as easy as possible for prospective students to, understand how they can actually transfer into your institution. And of course, current students will also be searching your catalog for some of, that program information, career outcomes information, but they also have some unique needs when it comes to navigating your catalog. So when I'm talking with university administrators, they often tell me that, the path to graduation is one of the most common reasons that students visit the catalog. So once students go ahead and, select and enroll in their program, they really need that clear information about how they're actually going to go ahead and complete it. And I think it's important to note here, this doesn't mean, just listing out every single possible course that they can take, since, that could potentially be hundreds of them. And, this really can be pretty overwhelming and confusing for students. Students really want to be able to, clearly see those course requirements and know, when they need to take each of those courses. So to help them visualize and, build out those pathways, institutions can, include information about when the courses are offered and if possible, real-time enrollment information on if those classes are available for registration. Policies that live in the catalog are another area that we don't always think about. I think we, pretty rarely hear about the real world impact of this, but a few months ago, I was reading a story in the Chronicle that highlighted the human impact of, how confusing catalogs can be and how that they can actually, negatively impact students. So this quote here at the bottom of the slide is about a recent graduate from Westchester University named Frederick Shagog. And he had a pretty long and difficult path to getting to graduation. After enrolling in college 6 times, dropping out, experiencing homelessness, coming to terms with a lot of very difficult situations and facing many adversities, he persevered and was about to complete all of the requirements for graduation. However, he was really struggling with one requirement and didn't know if he'd be able to meet it. And there was actually a policy that, would help him address that situation. But the article noted that, students could only make a request if they knew about this process, which is mentioned but was not fully explained in the university's catalog. And to him, that required form, he didn't even know about it. To him, it felt like it was hidden. And it wasn't until a staff member pointed out to him that he was able to go through with that process. So, whenever I'm thinking about why it's important for the catalog to be, accessible and navigable, I always like to think back to this story.
Yeah, absolutely, Bridget. I'd like to shift gears a little bit here and talk about how we align the catalog and curriculum processes to really make sure students always have the most current information. Really, we want to ensure that students always have the most up-to-date information, but of course, as we even saw in our recent poll, that doesn't always occur. So one thing we can consider is the timing of academic matriculation. On a traditional admission cycle, many students will have already admitted and actually enrolled by the time a catalog is published in summer or fall. Indeed, ACRO's recent survey on academic operations found that 54% of institutions do not have an approved catalog before students are recruited and admitted to that catalog year. But we can see that that timeline might not be the only reason the catalog isn't ready in time for students. So as we all know, the catalog is heavily tied to curriculum and any new changes that are made to that curriculum. And while 33% of institutions only allow course changes once a year and 47% only allow program changes once a year, we do see that more than half of institutions allow course and program changes more than that. And almost half allow unlimited course changes each year. And of course, it's wonderful to be able to continually innovate the curriculum and align it with current student and employer needs. What does this actually mean in practice when it comes to publishing the catalog and informing students of changes? And to me, I think this points really to a major need for institutions to examine how the curriculum and catalog processes are connected to make sure students are being served well through those processes. So we've just spent some time talking about the catalog and curriculum changes, and really would love to hear from you about how you're seeing this play out on your campus. We'll open a new poll here, and just please select how your institution navigates these two interconnected processes. As before, this will be open for just under 60 seconds, and then we'll take a look at the responses. And we're starting to see some answers come in. And certainly if you have kind of any additional commentary on your answer, feel free to drop it in the chat or in Q&A, and we can make sure to bring that into the conversation. Awesome, let's go ahead and start wrapping up the poll. Perfect. Awesome. So as we can see here, of the folks who are aware of the connection between catalog and curriculum at their institutions, over half of those folks say that it is aligned, which is great. However, I think we can also see that a fair portion is saying they're not aligned. And that's definitely what I'm noticing here. Bridget, anything stand out to you?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think what's interesting here is the folks who said, they're not really sure. And so, Lucy, I was wondering if you could kind of shed some perspective on, who at the institution would kind of typically, know about this if they wanted to inquire about that at their institution.
Sure, that's a great question. So as with many things, it depends a lot on the structure and size of institution. But I can definitely say that the folks that I most frequently work with on cataloging and curriculum management are oftentimes university registrars or academic coordinators. They're also in my experience, is typically kind of a team even working within the registrar's office. So any associate registrars who may be specifically tasked with managing and publishing that catalog.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. So, yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Yes, of course. So we'll go ahead and close that out. And I'd like to broadly kind of close out this section by really quickly talking about how students are connecting with advisors as well as the catalog. So the good news is that the recent ACRO survey found that 96% of students are made aware of their catalog of record in a variety of means. But when we look exactly at how students learn about their catalog of record, what stands out is that nearly two-thirds learn about it only after they meet with an advisor. This, of course, is a really big responsibility for advisors. So we'd like to talk a little bit about how we can help them effectively communicate this information to students. We know that advisors at a lot of institutions are overworked and have huge caseloads. And this is really why it's critical to help students access information easily, because it might be difficult to even get in to see an advisor. Therefore, a user-friendly and searchable catalog helps proactively inform students and answer some of those simpler questions. However, once students actually do meet with an advisor, we also want this to be a seamless experience. We know that advisors should be able to quickly find information in the catalog when meeting with students. They should also be able to easily share information that doesn't require students to sort through pages and pages of information. Any links shared with students should lead directly to the relevant page and not require them to Command F their way through pages or huge blocks of text. And finally, a user-friendly catalog enables advisors to stay up to date on the latest information.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing that, Lucy. So I want to finish this off by talking a little bit about how the catalog is tied to, many of the compliance regulations that we have to meet. And I know we had a question in Q&A about that, so we'll definitely make sure to get to that. But I know this is something that's certainly top of mind for many of you. So we'll go ahead and talk a bit about how the catalog, really has to constantly evolve to meet some of these new, regulations that we're all thinking about. And then we'll also take a minute to discuss what this means when thinking about applying for any, special funding opportunities. And then finally, we'll also go ahead and touch on what it means to create an accessible catalog. I think it's probably no secret that schools are expected to keep up with really an ever changing set of rules and regulations. And oftentimes the catalog, houses these policies and needs to be able to quickly reflect these changes. So on the left of the slide here, you'll see that this can be anything from keeping up with, the current and, latest requirements from Veterans Affairs benefits to really making sure that we're aligning with and publishing the most recent guidelines when it comes to Title IX. So I want to zoom in on what this means for schools who have students who use VA benefits to pay for their education. We actually hear this come up quite a bit when we're talking with administrators about their schools. So veterans benefits fall under Title IV, and these can only be dispensed if institutions are, following those published guidelines. Each institution has to have a school certifying official that ensures that all of these compliances are met. And the catalog is a big part of this. Each year, the Department of Veterans Affairs publishes a handbook for school certifying officials that lays out all of these requirements. And if institutions are found that they're actually not in compliance with these, then they might be at risk of being put on probation or actually losing that funding. And I've actually had a chance to browse this handbook, and I really feel your pain for anyone on the line that is in charge of meeting these requirements. It's a pretty long list to get through, and these requirements, are subject to change each year. For example, some of the newer requirements include showing degree maps, refund and grading policies, and listing faculty and their qualifications. So I think this really, all points to the fact that A dynamic catalog that can be easily modified to include these new requirements is really critical because it can help ensure institutions are, maintaining their eligibility for these VA benefits. I know we quickly touched on accessibility earlier in this webinar, but I wanted to go ahead and touch on this again because I do think this is such an important topic. An essential part of, I think, any discussion when it comes to the catalog should always, include, are we making sure that, students of all abilities can access the resources that are built for them? I listed just a few of the considerations here on this slide to make sure that students are able to access catalog information online. Some of these considerations include, making sure your catalog is compatible with functionalities such as an ADA compliant screen reader, navigation by keyboard, and screen magnification. Also note that your team should make sure these functionalities don't just work on desktop navigation, but as we talked about previously, also thinking about those mobile and tablet devices. And of course, this is a pretty complex topic, I would say. So to make sure you aren't missing anything here, I would definitely encourage, reaching out to your IT office or student accessibility office. And, they would probably have some more thoughts here to make sure that your catalog is fully compliant. Aside from compliance, we also know that the catalog is connected to various funding initiatives and grants in higher ed, specifically when thinking about Title III and Title V schools. So for a quick refresher for everyone, Title III and Title V cover certain institutional segments such as HBCUs, Hispanic serving institutions, minority serving institutions such as tribal colleges, and those who are serving a high proportion of low-income students. And, while schools might be, designated as Title III or Title V, this actually means that they might be eligible to apply for some special grants. And recently I browsed through some of those grant applications that were accepted in the previous year. And a number of these initiatives, actually tie directly to what is displayed in the catalog. And I listed just a few examples here on this slide. So on the left, you'll see one of the initiatives has to do with integrating, career, work-based, and financial wellness competencies into courses. I think this is really wonderful, but it definitely begs the question of, should these competencies, be advertised in the catalog, and should they be included in course descriptions so students are aware of these outcomes? Similarly, the initiative on the right intends to increase enrollment of Hispanic and low-income students by aligning career pathways. So prospective students, should really be able to easily find and then see how those programs are connected to career pathways in your catalog. And so, I think given the breadth and the depth of the information in the catalog, it's definitely critical to think about all of the great work that all of you are doing on campus, and making sure that it's accessible and visible to students in your catalog. And I'm seeing a couple of questions here that I will quickly get to. We did get one question here. Will we get a copy of the slides and the video? Yes, great question. We will be sending out an email that has both a link to the slides and a recording of this presentation as well. One other question I want to address here before I turn it back over to Lucy. Someone is asking, does the Department of Education require the catalog to have certain information, or is that the prerogative of the institution? Lucy, I think you might be the expert here, so I will let you handle this one.
Thanks, Bridget. I'm not sure I'm a full expert, but I can definitely share my experience, which is, as Bridget, I think, already shared, there's certain funding initiatives or VA provisions that do require specific information to be included in the catalog. The additional nuance I would add to that is that under the Higher Education Act of 1965, and I think it was then amended in 2008, there's various pieces of information that need to be disclosed by post-secondary institutions. So We oftentimes see the this type of consumer disclosure information be included as part of an institutional catalog, but certainly there's other places that folks might choose to house that information as well. And I know we're seeing a note in the chat here that yes, some content is required to be quoted exactly as provided. There's definitely pretty strict regulations around some of this content. So I would take, long story short, yes, it has to be available. Some institutions have some flexibility with whether that's in the catalog or elsewhere.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. Well, I will turn it back over to you again, Lucy, just for a quick overview before we get to our formal Q&A portion of the presentation.
Perfect. Thanks. And yeah, so pretty much with all of that said, I really just wanted to give a quick overview of how we here at CourseDog think about helping institutions maintain a really single source of truth within their catalog and their overall academic operations. At a high level, we focus on three main value drivers across our connected portfolio. So one is unification. We're really aiming for a seamless integration across your technology and to your SIS, to provide transparency into data and processes. Two is flexibility. So this means configurable forms, workflows, and user endpoints can really provide a customizable experience. And three is modernity. So we take a design-focused approach to user experience, change management, and implementation to make adoption of these tools across the institution as easy as possible. And if we just double click within that onto the catalog specifically, what we're really able to do is prioritize two things: configurability and navigability. I think we've seen today how important navigability is, especially. And so by allowing users to create an experience for catalog visitors, which is tailored to specific institutional needs and goals, we are able to capture some value there for institutions, as well as providing really highly modular workflows and approval processes, which themselves can allow for really deep and seamless integration with curriculum, resulting in that up-to-date single source of truth for students, staff, faculty, and administrators alike.
Perfect. Thanks, Lucy. Well, with that, I think we can get to the formal Q&A portion of today's presentation. I think we can probably launch that poll a little bit later, or we can keep it up now. But we want to take a couple minutes to address any questions that folks on the line might have. I know that we got to a couple of them during the presentation, but if you want to go ahead and submit any questions that came up during the presentation, feel free to go ahead and drop those in the Q&A, and we'll make sure to get to those. And we'll give everyone a couple of minutes to think about that. But it looks like we have our first question in here. And this person is wondering if we could talk about the integration with the SIS and what is compatible. So I'm assuming that's referring to the CourseDog catalog integrating with the SIS. So I will go ahead and throw that one over to Lucy.
Sure, thanks, Bridget. Yes, the catalog can integrate with most major SISs, including Colleague, Banner, PeopleSoft, Genzabar, Anthology, Workday, and I'm sure I'm missing some as well. What we can make sure to do is follow up with you specifically. We have pretty robust online documentation around our integration specs, and we can make sure that this question asker gets that. Additionally, I'll say for folks who have homegrown SISs or maybe an alternate system, we definitely work with schools on that front as well. And that integration can frequently take more of two approaches, one being we have open APIs, and two being kind of a CSV upload that then gets the data in-app.
Great, thank you for that. All right, just browsing through these next questions here.
Yes, I see this next question here is around ability to print a page with a course or program outline. Yes, we do have that ability. I think someone's commenting that it seems like sometimes they see it and sometimes they don't. And that's, I think, really gets back to some of the configurable nature. Some institutions elect to include that type of print functionality on their public site, and some institutions don't. But certainly the ability to print kind of a single page PDF course or program called overview or outline is something that we can include.
Perfect. All right. Well, we will keep this open for another minute or two to make sure we get to any other final questions here. But I'll also say, if you have any additional questions that come to mind after this webinar, feel free to reach out to myself or to Lucy. Our information is in the deck that we'll send out afterwards. So everyone should have that. It does seem like these are the only questions I am seeing for now. So I think we can probably go ahead and wrap up a little bit early and give everyone some time back in their day. Oh, let's actually we have one more question here, just in the nick of time. Great. All right, this question again, it looks like another kind of feature specific question, so I'll direct it towards Lucy. Does the print function include a nice view of the catalog section? I know the VA requires PDFs of the catalog every year and they won't use links.
Yes, that that fact that the VA doesn't click hyperlinks is definitely something we're familiar with. And the PDF catalog functionality does include a table of contents, which itself can be somewhat configured. We see some institutions, for example, want to include many subsections in their table of contents. Some institutions prefer to just have, the highest level.
Great. Okay, perfect. Well, as I was mentioning, I think we'll be able to get out of here a few minutes early, which is wonderful. So we just have one final question here just for our own internal knowledge. So let's go ahead and launch this poll. Just a quick yes, no, and then I think we can let everyone get on their way and get some water, get a snack, or maybe even a short walk before your next meeting.
It is unseasonably warm where I am, and so a little walk sounds great. Good idea, Bridge.
Yes. Yes. At least in the mid-Atlantic today, it's very warm outside, so would highly recommend. All right, great. Well, thank you so much to everyone that's joined us today. I think this has been a really great discussion. I've loved all of the questions and observations we've gotten. I always love to see that. I think, nothing worse when there's crickets on the line. So thank you so much to everyone that's joined us today, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of the day.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all.